The ocean was endless, black, and silent. For more than a month, Christopher Columbus and his men had drifted westward into the unknown. The year was 1492, and the great gamble of discovery was eating away at their courage. Supplies were dwindling. Tempers were fraying. Whispers of mutiny floated across the decks of the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. They had seen nothing but water and sky, day after day, night after night, the horizon mocking them with its emptiness. But on the night of October 11th, just hours before landfall, something happened that none of them could explain. Columbus himself recorded it in his journal, though later copies edited, softened, and sometimes erased the words. He described a strange light rising from the sea, sudden, brilliant, like a flicker of fire where no fire should be. At first it seemed to dance upon the waves, glowing in the darkness. Then, according to the log, it rose slowly upward, hovering in the air, before vanishing into the night. The men who saw it were terrified. Some whispered of omens, of devils, of witchcraft. Others swore it was the lantern of a phantom ship, guiding them or warning them. But there were those who claimed, in hushed voices, that it moved like no lantern, no flame, no natural thing. The Atlantic swallowed the light as quickly as it had given it. The crew was left staring at black waves, their fear growing. Only Columbus remained silent, watching, writing. Hours later, the cry rang out, "Tierra! Land! The Bahamas! The New World!" For centuries, the journals of Columbus were studied, rewritten, censored. The church took possession of many records. The version most historians know is filtered through the hand of Bartolomé de las Casas, a Dominican friar who copied parts of Columbus's writings decades later. Yet even in those altered lines, the mystery survives. A light, like a small wax candle, that rose and lifted up. But here's the strange part. Columbus was not the only explorer to see such things. Sailors across the 15th and 16th centuries spoke of lights in the sea, glowing spheres, fiery columns, luminous wheels turning beneath the waves. They called them candles of the deep, or devil's fires. Modern scholars dismiss them as bioluminescent plankton, as natural gas, as tricks of the eye. But the descriptions, the way the lights moved, rose, and vanished, they echo something far stranger. Some ufologists argue this was the first recorded USO encounter, unidentified submerged object, a craft not from the stars above, but from the oceans below. The timing chills the imagination. On the very eve of the so-called discovery of America, Columbus saw something rising from the sea, as if watching, as if waiting. Was it coincidence? Or was it a silent witness to history? A presence lurking beneath the waves long before Europeans set foot on the New World. And there's more. Legends among the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean speak of glowing sky visitors, of beings who came from the sea and the stars. Stories told long before 1492. Some describe canoes of fire that rose from the water. Others, men of light who descended from above. When those legends are set beside Columbus's account, the pieces twist together into something unsettling. Did Columbus, in his desperate voyage across the unknown Atlantic, stumble not just upon a new continent, but upon something watching from the depths? The journals end the moment land is sighted. The light is forgotten, pushed aside in the triumph of conquest. But the ocean keeps its secrets, and if that night's glowing fire truly rose from beneath the waves, then perhaps America was never discovered at all. Perhaps it was revealed. The strange light that Columbus recorded in his journal might seem like an isolated event, a single flicker in the darkness of history, but it was not. For centuries, sailors crossing the world's oceans spoke of lights that haunted the waters. They described them in fearful tones, as omens, as curses, as something beyond understanding. The sea itself seemed alive with presence, watching from the depths. The earliest explorers called them candles of the sea, small glowing orbs that floated just beneath the surface, trailing ships for hours, sometimes days. They would vanish without a trace, only to return again when storms gathered. Some men swore the light saved them, guiding their ships through tempests. Others cursed them as demons luring them to destruction. In the Indian Ocean, Arab navigators told of pearls of fire that rolled beneath the waves. In the Pacific, Polynesian voyagers spoke of canoes of light that slipped in and out of the sea. And in Europe, sailors whispered of St. Elmo's fire, blue flames that danced on the masts during storms. Scientists today call it plasma discharge. But what Columbus described was different. It wasn't fire on the mast. It wasn't lightning. It was something rising, lifting, moving with intent, and the timing was everything. October 11th, 1492. Columbus sees a light lift from the ocean. Hours later, land is sighted. Was it coincidence? Or was it, as some ufologists suggest, a signal, a marker that guided them to shore? The indigenous peoples of the Caribbean had their own tales. The Taino spoke of beings called Zemi, spirits of the sky and sea who could take on luminous forms. Some were benevolent, others vengeful. Legends described glowing visitors who arrived in boats of flame and taught them sacred knowledge. In Mesoamerica, long before Columbus, the Maya carved symbols of shining discs descending from the heavens. Some glyphs even show objects half in the sky, half in the sea, as if acknowledging that these visitors belonged to both realms. Could it be that what Columbus saw was part of something older? A presence known to those who lived by the ocean long before Europeans arrived. The more one looks, the more the fragments align. Consider this. In the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors in the Gulf of Mexico reported lights beneath their ships. They called them angels of the deep. Some swore the lights followed them for days, glowing brighter when battles drew near. In Peru, chroniclers wrote of fishermen terrified by fiery globes rising from the Pacific at night, leaving behind strange scorch marks on the beaches. And always the same detail. The lights moved with purpose. Not drifting like plankton, not random like fireflies, but deliberate. Centuries later, in the 20th century, military sailors would describe the same thing. The U.S. Navy recorded unidentified submerged objects near Puerto Rico, capable of speeds no submarine could match. Soviet submarines reported glowing spheres pacing them. In the Arctic seas, vanishing into the depths when pursued. The pattern had never stopped. But Columbus's encounter stands apart because of what it represented. The old world was on the edge of discovering the new. Civilization itself was shifting. And in that precise moment, on the eve of history's turning point, something revealed itself. Something that rose from the ocean, as if to witness the change. What was it? Skeptics argue it was nothing more than a natural illusion, a trick of the eyes, a fisherman's torch on a distant canoe. But Columbus was a seasoned navigator. He knew the sea. He knew what torches looked like, how light bent on the horizon. His words were careful, measured. He described the light not as a simple flame, but as something rising, lifting, hovering. And then there is the silence that followed. His journals mention it once, then never again. Later editors softened the detail, turning it into a vague light in the distance. The church, which had control over many of Columbus's records, was known to censor descriptions of omens, visions, or anything that could challenge doctrine. To them, the discovery of America was a divine mission, ordained by God. A light from the sea rising into the sky? That sounded dangerously like heresy. So the words were buried, the story trimmed, altered, forgotten, yet not erased. Enough survived in the copies to remind us that something was there, flickering in the night before history changed forever. And perhaps the most haunting detail is not what was written, but what was left unsaid. Because if the light appeared once, who is to say it did not appear again? What if, as Columbus sailed deeper into the Caribbean, he saw more, events that never made it into the surviving journals? What if the indigenous peoples were right, and the oceans were never empty, but alive, with watchers who emerged when civilizations crossed thresholds? Some ufologists call it the Sentinel Theory. The idea that intelligent forces monitor turning points in human history, not to intervene, not to conquer, but to witness, to mark the moment when worlds shift. And on October 11th, 1492, as 3 battered ships drifted westward, in desperate hope, perhaps a silent sentinel rose from the depths, burning briefly in the dark, and then vanished again into the ocean that has always hidden more than it revealed. The ocean keeps its secrets, but sometimes, just sometimes, it lets the truth break the surface before sinking back into silence. When Columbus returned from his voyage, the world changed forever. Europe celebrated his discovery. Kings and queens fought for their share of the New World, and the church declared it divine providence. The story of America's discovery was written quickly, wrapped in glory and destiny. But some details were left behind. The journals of Columbus were never widely published. They passed into the hands of the Spanish crown and later the church. Only fragments survive, preserved in copies made by Bartolomé de las Casas decades later. And it is in those fragments that the mysterious light survives. Brief, enigmatic, unsettling. Why was it minimized? Historians argue that Las Casas may have altered or simplified the description. Perhaps he saw it as irrelevant. Perhaps he feared ridicule. But others suggest the truth was more deliberate. The church was deeply invested in portraying Columbus's voyage as a mission blessed by God. A strange light rising from the sea, hovering in the sky, did not fit the narrative. If it was divine, why describe it in terms so physical, so mechanical? And if it was not divine, then what was it? For centuries, the mention of the light was treated as a curiosity, a footnote in the saga of discovery. Scholars debated whether it was a natural illusion, a trick of the eye, or nothing at all. The ocean is full of mysteries, they said. Bioluminescent plankton, mirages, a fire on some distant canoe. The simplest answers. But the simplest answers never explain the details. Columbus wrote that the light rose and lifted up. He did not describe a reflection. He did not describe it as drifting or flickering on the horizon. He described motion, purpose, intent. And when modern ufology was born in the mid-20th century, researchers began to look back. Suddenly, Columbus's account took on a new weight. In 1959, one of the earliest UFO researchers, Donald Cahoe, mentioned Columbus's sighting in a lecture. calling it the first recorded UFO report of the New World. Soon after, writers began including it in catalogs of ancient sightings. It was no longer a curious footnote. It was evidence. To skeptics, this was absurd. But to believers, it was a revelation. The idea that on the very threshold of America's discovery, something from the sea had revealed itself was too powerful to ignore. And then, patterns began to emerge. Historians unearthed other sailors' logs from the Age of Discovery, describing lights in the sea, strange orbs that rose and fell, objects that moved with unnatural speed. Indigenous legends across the Americas told of glowing visitors from the ocean and sky. Put together, the fragments painted a picture that was difficult to dismiss. The theory grew bolder. Columbus had witnessed not a trick of light, but a USO, an unidentified submerged object, a craft emerging from the ocean, watching, waiting, and vanishing again. The church, of course, had no interest in such interpretations. For centuries, religious institutions had suppressed stories that challenged doctrine. UFOs did not exist in theology. Miracles did. Angels did. Demons did. But machines rising from the sea, that was dangerous. And so the story was edited, diluted, nearly erased. Yet it survived. And today, it stands as one of the oldest written accounts of what might have been a UFO encounter at sea. But the implications are darker than most want to admit. If Columbus saw a light, then he was not alone in the New World. If it was a craft, then something had been there before him, watching the oceans long before Europe ever crossed them. If it was a message, then what exactly was being said? Skeptics still cling to their explanations. Bioluminescent fish, distant torches, atmospheric mirages. But the words Columbus used remain stubborn. It rose and lifted up. Those words cannot be explained away, and so the story endures, not as proof, not as fiction, but as a haunting reminder. The discovery of America may not have been the beginning of history, but only the continuation of a story much older. A story written in the dark waters of the Atlantic, in the glow of a light that should not have been there. A story the world was never meant to know. Today, the strange light Columbus described is still debated. To many historians, it is nothing but a curiosity, a trick of nature, an error of perception, a passing flame on the sea. Yet for others, it is far more. It is the beginning of a pattern, one that stretches across centuries, from the Age of Discovery to the Cold War, from wooden caravels to nuclear submarines. Because the oceans have always held secrets, and the deeper humanity looks, the stranger those secrets become. Modern researchers have re-examined Columbus's journal. They point to his choice of words. The light was like a candle, rising and lifting up. That phrase doesn't fit with a fisherman's torch. It doesn't fit with bioluminescent plankton. It suggests motion, intent, something emerging from the water, as if watching. The U.S. Navy knows these stories well. In 2004, pilots from the USS Nimitz encountered tic-tac craft near the California coast, objects capable of diving into the ocean at impossible speeds. In the 1970s, Soviet submarines reported glowing spheres that pursued them beneath the Arctic ice. Even today, radar operators speak of transmedium objects, machines that move effortlessly between sea and sky. When seen in this light, Columbus's account feels less like a legend and more like the first page of a long and ongoing story. A story of contact, not with the stars above, but with the deep. And the implications are unsettling. If advanced intelligences exist, perhaps they do not live in orbit. But in the very oceans we thought we ruled, the seas cover 70% of Earth. They are vast, dark, and unexplored. What better hiding place? Some theorists even suggest the light Columbus saw was a sentinel event, a deliberate signal at a turning point in human history, the birth of the New World, marked by a silent witness from the depths, not to interfere, not to guide, but to observe, to record, to remind us that we were never truly alone. Others go further. They argue that many key moments in history carry these shadows. Strange lights at sea battles, glowing craft during wartime, UFOs appearing at nuclear sites, always watching when humanity stands on the edge of change. Skeptics still cling to earthly explanations, and perhaps they are right. Perhaps it was nothing more than a light in the distance. But if that were true, why does the description echo across centuries of similar sightings? Why do sailors from every age, every ocean, describe the same thing, glowing orbs that rise from the sea, hover, and vanish? The truth, as always, is buried. What Columbus saw was recorded, censored, and nearly erased, and yet, against all odds, it survived. A single sentence, a flicker in the night, carried forward through time. Enough to remind us, enough to haunt us. The ocean has always been more than water. It is a mirror, a veil, a gate. It hides what we are not ready to see. On October 11th, 1492, as 3 battered ships drifted into history, the veil lifted for a moment, a light rose from the sea. A secret broke the surface, and then, just as quickly, it vanished again into silence. Perhaps it was an omen. Perhaps it was a machine. Perhaps it was a warning. But one truth is certain. The ocean is not empty. It never was. And what waits beneath the waves may not be waiting for us to discover it. It may be waiting to reveal itself when the time is right.